Hello everybody, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines, and welcome back to a new video in our series War Heroes in White, where we talk about the lives and wrecks of hospital ships from various eras, such as World War I and World War II and beyond. In today's video, we will talk about the hospital ship, the USS Comfort. Now the vessel would be owned by the US Navy. She would be built by the shipbuilders Bethlehem Steel Corporation in Los Angeles, and she would be built under a maritime commission contract. Now if we talk about the specifics of the ship, she would be 6,000 tons, with her length being 417 feet. She would have had a beam of 60 feet. She could go a speed of 15 knots. She had a capacity of 700 beds for passengers or patients, including 58 beds in locked wards. On board, there were 3 complete surgical operating rooms, an X-ray room, a pharmacy, a dental clinic, an eyes, ears, nose and throat clinic, and an outpatient clinic. The ship was also equipped with a post office, a barber shop, a library, an elevator, lounge rooms, a public address system for relaying phonograph records and radio shortwave programs to patients, and a motion picture viewing area on the main deck, and sun decks for convalescent patients. Everything was dedicated to the treatment, entertainment and comfort of the wounded. The vessel would be launched on the 18th of March 1943. And she would be commissioned on the 5th of May 1944. Upon commissioning, she became one of 3 hospital ships, along with her sister ships, the USS Hope and the USS Mercy. Built, commanded and crewed by the Navy for the Army, these ships were designed for the evacuation and transport of patients after primary care had been administered, unlike Navy hospital ships. The Army supplied medical equipment and personnel. According to the Army Medical Complement Table of Organization, the staff could be temporarily reinforced if the ship was directly supporting amphibious operations. Now the USS Comfort operated throughout World War II with a Navy crew and Army medical personnel. Now if we look at her wartime career, on June 21st, 1944, she set sail from San Pedro, destined for Brisbane, Australia and Hollandia, New Guinea. At Hollandia, a significant Army hospital center had been established to manage casualties from the Philippine operations. From this base, the hospital ship undertook 2 voyages in October and November, evacuating the wounded from Leyte in the Philippine Islands. In December, she transported these patients back to San Pedro, California. After returning via Leyte, the USS Comfort arrived back in Hollandia on February 6, 1945. Following a voyage to Subic Bay and Lingayen Gulf, Luzon, for evacuees in March, the hospital ship stood by off Okinawa from the 2nd to the 9th of April. Receiving wounded for evacuation to Guam, she returned to Okinawa on April 23rd. However, just 6 days later, she was struck by a Japanese suicide plane. The resulting explosion instantly killed 29 people on the ship. Among the casualties were 1 Navy and 5 Army medical officers, 6 nurses, 1 Navy and 9 Army enlisted men, and 7 patients. Additionally, 31 Army and 7 Navy crew members sustained injuries, along with 10 patients who suffered additional harm. At the moment of the attack, the entire surgical team was engaged in surgery, tending to casualties recently evacuated from Okinawa, resulting in the loss of the majority of them. The ship's engines were swiftly shut down. Despite activating the general alarm, it failed to function as intended, having been obliterated in the explosion. To alert the crew, the general alarm was instead sounded through the operational public address system. Ensuring safety, the ventilation system was secured across the entire vessel. Commander Task Force 51 was promptly informed via both voice transmission and backup CW circuits, as the main radio had been rendered inoperative by the explosion. An anti-aircraft was requested. The USS Comfort sustained severe damage, resulting in the complete destruction of critical areas such as surgical and X-ray facilities, the Chief of Medical Services office, the X-ray office, the chaplain's office, and the central supply room. Partial destruction affected the pharmacy and dental clinic, and wards 1 and 2 on the superstructure deck. On the main deck, wards 1 to 3 and 1 to 5 and the main diet pantry were destroyed, with the dispensary also sustaining damage. Furthermore, wireways and water mains were ruptured across 3 decks. A fire broke out on the ship, prompting the deployment of water, fog, and CO2 to extinguish it. The forward emergency diesel fire pump supplied water for firefighting efforts. However, the main fire pumps had to be temporarily shut down until cutouts could be secured to damaged areas, preventing potential flooding caused by ruptured fire mains and fresh water lines. The lifeboats were cleared, ready for lowering. Amidst the preparations, confusion arose when an unauthorized message, "We are abandoning ship," was mistakenly transmitted by an overly eager radio man who misunderstood the order to clear the lifeboats. Bilge suctions and 2 180-gallon submersible pumps were activated to remove water from holds and compartments flooded by broken mains and water from fire hoses. The ship's 10-degree starboard list was corrected by adjusting fuel distribution. At 9:15 p.m. reports from the engine room indicated that no damage had been sustained in that department. Damage control further reported that the ship's watertight integrity remained intact and the fire was now under control. It was considered that the ship would be able to complete her voyage. At 10:05 p.m., the ship was dimmed and resumed her course and speed alongside the escorting destroyer Stringbam. Steering had to be managed from the steering engine room, as the explosion had disabled the bridge con. Deep within the hull, among the wounded, Major Alexander Silverglade took charge upon discovering Lieutenant Colonel Linsman's injuries, leading what remained of the medical team. Nurse Evelyn Batchelor was thrown by the explosion onto the stirrups, supporting a patient undergoing a pelvic operation in the ship's surgery section. While Lieutenant Batchelor emerged unscathed, tragically, the patient did not survive. Major Dorsey Brannan, an army surgeon, had just finished an operation and was dressing his patient when he was blown right through a window. But he was unhurt except for a cut on his hand. He said it was fortunate that few patients on board required further major surgery. Had that been the case, the carnage would have been much greater. Following the explosion, all uninjured hospital ward personnel continued their duties as assigned. Administrative officers, the chaplain and a dental officer assessed the overall situation. The 2 remaining surgeons on temporary duty sustained minor injuries and were in a state of shock after being blasted out of an operating room onto the weather deck. All injured personnel and patients with new injuries were brought to the patient's lounge, which served as a makeshift first aid station. Here, severely burned or injured cases received morphine and plasma, while splints were applied to fractured limbs. As the casualties filled the patient's lounge, nearby offices, pantry, and barbershop were repurposed into additional first aid stations. To accommodate more patients, beds in the wards were freed up by transferring the less critical cases to the forward mess hall. Meanwhile, in the wards, ongoing treatment continued. Teams of nurses and medical department enlisted personnel swiftly prepared plasma to ensure no delays in its administration. The wounded aboard, recently evacuated from the brutal battles of Okinawa to the reassuring sanctuary of a hospital ship, were deeply shaken by the sudden attack. Having endured fierce combat amidst Okinawa's dense forests and treacherous terrain, they had faced the onslaught of Japanese fire. Seeking respite from the chaos of war, they had found solace on the tranquil decks of the hospital ship, free from the tension of combat, or so they thought. Now they were not so sure. Supplies were transported from the medical stores to the emergency dressing station in the patient's lounge. Additionally, nurses and enlisted personnel from the medical department set up 2 more emergency dressing stations in the forward and aft mess halls. The forward mess hall station served as an operating room for patients in need of specialized treatment. Medical officers moved between the dressing stations and wards, ensuring they could provide their specialized attention to as many individuals as possible. The administrative officers and the chaplain organized teams of enlisted men of the Army and Navy to search through the wreckage for the injured and dead. Injured individuals were carefully transported on litters to the dressing stations, while the deceased were respectfully taken to the morgue for identification by the hospital's adjutant. Due to the shortage of medical officers, the acting commanding officer of the hospital requested Captain Tucker, the ship's captain, to urgently request surgeons and surgical instruments to be sent to the ship without delay. By the next morning, the 2 injured surgeons were able to carry on. All the wounded had received emergency treatment for the prevention of shock, and beds had been found for them in the hospital wards so that the need for outside help no longer existed. Fortunately, there were no chest or abdominal wounds requiring surgery. The composed and methodical manner in which the Army and Navy carried out their responsibilities, despite the looming danger and intense mental pressure, provided courage and reassurance to everyone, particularly the patients. The early establishment of a sense of security helped prevent panic. The outstanding collaboration between both branches of the military and their unwavering commitment to duty, plus the training that made them efficient, brought under control a situation that might otherwise have been chaotic. Around the time of the attack, the commander of Destroyers Division 112 was steering an easterly course slightly ahead of the USS Comfort. His responsibility included overseeing a convoy of vessels towing others at approximately 5 knots. As the USS Comfort was catching up with his group, he was keeping an eye out for the overtaking ship. It was 8:30 p.m. on April 28, 1945, and his unit was en route from Karama Reto to Guam. The USS Lindsay was being towed by the USS Yuma, while LSM-28 was in tow by ATR-62. He too found the weather fair, the sea calm, and very little wind. The moon was very bright. All in all, it was a beautiful night at sea. The USS Comfort was closing in on the formation from approximately 7 miles behind. the hospital ship was brightly lit and clearly visible. Radar was tracking a single unidentified bogey in the vicinity of the Comfort, and the task force had been alerted of its presence. Approximately 15 minutes later, a sudden intense burst of light was spotted near the Comfort. The commander of the task force suspected that the Comfort had been hit by either a bomb or a kamikaze plane. However, no flames were visible after the initial flash had subsided. The high-speed assault transport ship, the USS Stringham, a former World War I destroyer from the same group, received immediate orders via voice radio to proceed to the Comfort's aid. Approximately 1 minute later, the salvage vessels ATR-61 and the ATR-38 were also dispatched to assist the stricken ship. Additionally, it was decided to send an LST, which is a landing ship, to ensure there would be sufficient space for survivors. At 9:05 p.m., LST 1000 confirmed that she had adequate facilities to care for survivors, including a doctor. The LST 1000 was then directed to head towards the Comfort. At 9:06 p.m., the USS Bryant reported that she had been informed of the Comfort unloading boats. Consequently, the Bryant was instructed to rush to the Comfort at high speed. 5 vessels were considered to be sufficient aid to take care of any emergency around 9:15 p.m. Communication from USS Comfort indicated that she was underway and heading towards her destination, but required immediate aid and requested a protective screen. By 9:25 p.m., the Comfort clarified that she only needed protection against air attacks. Subsequently, all assisting vessels except the USS Stringham were instructed to return to their designated positions. The Stringham was tasked with remaining alongside the Comfort until daylight. On board the Comfort, Captain Tucker sought guidance regarding the use of lights, with the commander of the task force advising him to extinguish them. Concurrently, it was relayed that the destroyers Wicks and Fraser were en route to screen the Comfort for the remainder of the night. The Stringham was then directed to rejoin the task force once the others had rendezvoused. By 12:25 a.m., the Stringham had rejoined the task force. The Kamikaze plane crashed through 3 decks before coming to rest on the ship's second deck. News of the attack was communicated via voice radio to Com Task Force 51 in Okinawa, prompting the dispatch of another destroyer to escort the ship on her voyage to Guam. The USS Comfort reached Guam at 7 a.m. on May 3rd, 1945. Upon arrival, the uninjured patients disembarked, while a mass funeral for the 29 deceased was conducted at Amgot Cemetery. Tempers ran high in naval circles at this premeditated and cold-blooded attack on the hospital ship, proceeding alone with full illumination, including powerful searchlights that highlighted huge red crosses painted on the sides, superstructure, and stack. It was the first known instance of the Japanese deliberately attacking an American hospital ship, despite 2 other hospital ships being threatened during the Okinawa operation. Before that night, naval personnel had generously considered these attacks as mere errors. The mangled body of the Japanese pilot was recovered, along with all the papers found on him, and handed over to naval intelligence at Guam. Additionally, numerous parts of the plane were collected and turned in, including the engine, machine guns, a wing, and sections of the propeller. On May 5, 1945, Colonel Linsman sent this message to his shipmates.
I am filled with sorrow at this time for the great loss. All of us have sustained with the death of many of our shipmates and with the maiming of many others. Our tremendous loss is deeply felt by all of us, I am sure. Our group has endured a major catastrophe. We will never forget any of our casualties. I am also filled with great pride to know how effectively and spiritedly all Navy, Army, and Red Cross personnel worked following our recent disaster. I commend them all exultingly. The immediate job was a tremendous one, and it could not have been done better. The response from all of you in that time of extreme need is indeed worthy of the highest praise. I give you that praise and my thanks.
After receiving temporary repairs in Guam, the USS Comfort departed for Los Angeles, California, arriving on May 28th. The USS Comfort arrived in Subic Bay on September 5th, 1945, and served as a station hospital ship until October 11th. Following a voyage to Okinawa, she set sail for home, stopping in Yokohama, Japan and Guam, and arrived in San Pedro, California on December 11th. She embarked on another journey between January 1st and March 4th, 1946, visiting Manila, Yokohama, Incheon, Korea, and Okinawa. The USS Comfort was decommissioned in San Francisco on April 19th, 1946, and was transferred to the Army on the same day. The USS Comfort was awarded 2 battle stars for her service during World War II. And that marks the end of a video, my friends. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that would help out the channel a lot. Now, if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below, as I absolutely love reading your comments. And please let me know in the comment section down below as well what ships you would like me to cover in the future. Now be as well sure to check out our social media pages. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also recently have a website, oldshippinglines.com, where we have articles of the ships we cover and we have book reviews as well. I think you will enjoy the website very much. Now, with that out of the way, guys, I wish you all a good night or day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy, and we will see each other on the next video. Goodbye, my friends.